Welcome to the Bodkins Show. Welcome to the Bodkins Show, folks. I am that dude, Bodkins, as well. This is our always Sunday night evening show. I have been on the air. We have been doing a lot of big things here on the Bodkins channel. Real quick before we get into tonight's episode, if you missed our Head Kicks and Haymakers episodes this morning and yesterday morning, please check that out. You can check that out right here on the Bodkins channel network. Also, the Let's Talk Sports channel as well on their network. We have Head Kicks and Haymakers. We talked to UFC. We previewed UFC 277 yesterday, and we did our post show UFC 277 post show. It's our new show. It'll be coming to you every Sunday morning. Head Kicks and Haymakers, talking all things MMA. But I'll always be right here back here on Sunday night as well with us. Always to have a little special guest where we talk all things life, their teams, their sports, their passion. And tonight's special guest, I got a good treat for you guys. It's a living legend out of Baltimore. Only thing more legend than this man is Omar. Give it up for Cordell Woodland, host of Shaking It Up Sports on 105.7 The Fan out of Baltimore. Big warm welcome. Thank you, Cordell, for joining us. The man, the myth, the legend. Thank you for joining me here on the Bodkin Show. Cordell, how you doing?
Sure.
I appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you having me, man. This is cool. It's always a good time when you could talk sports, especially when you're talking football, man. Football season is here and I'm excited.
Me too. It's right around the corner. I think in about 2 weeks we got somewhat of a football game, if you want to call it, on that amateur preseason game, Hall of Fame game. But hey, it'll still be better than what was it, the USFL that was playing a couple of weeks ago, so we'll take it, right?
Definitely we'll take some professional, the highest level. You got me?
Exactly. So you always been a football guy? Yeah, I got you. You always been a football guy?
Definitely.
Your whole life growing up, you've been a football guy?
Yeah, football is my first love. Growing up, I grew up a Washington Redskins fan.
So you were a Redskins fan growing up?
Yeah, grew up
even allowed to say that nowadays?
Oh, well, you're right. Washington Commanders. I don't know what's going on. You look fine on my screen.
So what led you into me neither? You look fine on me, but we are lagging. I don't know if it's you or me.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Because
you want to call me back? You want to log out and call me? Come back in.
Definitely, right. I'll try that.
I don't know if it's all right. That it might be a you thing. It might be a me thing. I don't know. All right. Well, he's gonna come back. Sorry, folks. We're just now getting into it. I have no idea. I am good to go. This is what happens sometimes. Technology sucks, folks. But he's gonna be hopping back on. I see. Well, I think we're good to go here. Woo. Cordell's going to be joining us. We were just getting into it. Sound like he grew up a football guy, was a big football fan growing up. Not sure if that was him or me, but we'll get into it here in just a little bit with Cordell. Big news in the football world while we're waiting on him to get back to us. How about Deebo Samuel getting paid today? I mean, I was looking at that deal. It's being reported. Deebo, 3-year deal for Deebo Samuel. Kind of checking my Twitter here. I had reposted this. Let's go back. Maybe I didn't post it. Here we go. Ian Rappaport's reporting here. The 49ers got a 3-year deal extension worth $73 million max, and 71-55, 71 guarantee total here. The guarantee is 58. 58 guaranteed for Mr. Deebo Samuel. So how about that for Deebo? Deebo's getting that deal done. There. All right, bringing him back. Hopefully this will work. Hopefully we should be back here representing the man from Baltimore himself, the living legend, host of Shaking It Up Sports, Cordell Woodland. Hey, are we good now?
I'm trying. I hope so. I moved to a different location. Everything good?
Yeah, you're good, brother. You're good. Perfect.
Cool.
So as we were getting into it, I heard you say you grew up a football fan, was now what was called a Washington Commander. So talk about that, like growing into football. Were you a player or just a fan, or how did that come about?
Yeah, man. Definitely got attached to football from probably the first time that I saw a football game. I grew up right up the street from RFK Stadium, right in Southeast DC. Yeah, football was definitely my first love. I mean, I grew up really idolizing guys like Brian Mitchell and Barry Sanders really taught me how to play the game of football. And so I did play growing up as a kid. Like to think I was pretty good. Some of my childhood highlight tapes would say I was pretty good. And yeah, man, I just got attached to it from there. And I grew up as the kid wanting to go to the NFL, dreaming that I would play in the league. And obviously, that's not the case. But I've always been a sports fanatic, and I work in a field now that allows me to be blessed enough to cover a professional NFL team, and a pretty good one at that.
So I mean, what position was it? I mean, you said Barry Sanders was the guy. So were you out there in the backyard and in high school? Were you Barry Sanders or were you somebody else?
Oh yeah, I was definitely Barry Sanders-esque on the field. I was that little dude that didn't want to get hit. So I'm just, I'm really shifty. I'm hard to catch. I'll never forget my first year playing contact football. I was 10 years old, and they're playing contact football at a much younger age nowadays. But 10 was I believe the youngest that we were allowed to play at that time. So I'm playing 65 pound, and I only weighed about 55 pounds at the time. I was extremely small, but granted, the coach wanted me to play the quarterback. I played my first year playing contact football. I played starting quarterback. I actually never came off the field. Played middle linebacker. I started playing safety, and I actually could tackle a little bit. And at that age, a lot of kids are afraid of contact, and I wasn't. So they had me playing middle linebacker. I was a kick returner. I did it all. So I played quarterback, but we weren't really throwing the ball. So every play, the coach just called nothing but quarterback bootleg left, quarterback bootleg right, man. And I used to look like a little Lamar out there for sure.
Did you play in high school then?
Didn't have the grades to necessarily play in
Hey,
high school.
we all been there, brother. We all been there.
Yeah, wanted to.
Yeah.
Wanted to, and I probably could have had I played a little bit my freshman year, but my father was coaching at the time. He was coaching like boys and girls club, so he wanted me to play for them because he kind of thought at the time I was a little too small for high school or whatever. So I ended up doing that, and looking back, I probably should have played high school football so it could get me on the track with school and force me to kind of get my grades together, and I would have something to work for to want to stay on the team. But I did end up playing like a little semi-pro after the fact, though. And I've always been around the game. Even to this day, I play in a lot of flag leagues. Like I try to stay active, and definitely I'm pretty confident that I'm still a little sharp out there for sure.
All right. So talk to me a little bit about that semi-pro league that you was in and how that came about.
Yeah, one of my friends from high school, really growing up as a kid, a couple of them actually, they all loved to play football, and they weren't necessarily playing on a D1 college football team or even going to a D1 college school for that matter. So I was living in Maryland at the time, and there was this semi-pro team starting up in a city out here in Maryland, and we all kind of joined into that, and it started off like as a flag team, but we ended up getting the funding to be a semi-pro team. So we ended up playing a year of semi-pro football. It was very low level, no doubt about it. But it was good to put the pads on and get out there, play some real football. That definitely was fun.
What'd you play? What position you play on the semi-pro team?
I was a corner and a safety. Tried me at receiver. My hands weren't necessarily as good then as they crazy as enough that I think my hands are better now. But back then I've just always loved to cover and get interceptions. My hands weren't necessarily good enough to be a receiver, but it was good enough to be a DB. And more times than not, go ahead.
Were you the guy that swatted the ball 10 yards down and was standing over the dude?
Well, the thing is, on defense, I could catch the ball. I could catch it on defense, but I couldn't really catch it on offense. My hands weren't good enough to be a receiver, but it was good enough to be a DB. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. So what happened? So how did you get into 105, hosting up the Shakin Up Sports? Like, how did you get into that? Like, and what are you guys doing over there?
So that's actually a pretty long story. So I'll try to condense it as much as possible for you. I was at a point in my life where I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. And I was working in the federal government out in DC, downtown, and it just wasn't really fulfilling to me. Like I said, I grew up thinking I was going to be in the NFL. You know what I'm saying? And now I'm working got a desk job, which there's nothing to be upset. I'm not down in that at all. I made good money. I had benefits. I was set there. It was good. But it just wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something where I wouldn't necessarily know what my day would look like. I would know what I'm going to do, but I wouldn't necessarily know what's coming out of that day. And I've always been a guy that talks sports constantly, even at the government job. It was a bunch of guys of us in the building that would, anytime we're outside on our break or something, we're talking about whatever's going on in the sports world. So that's just always been me. Like I said, I've always been a sports freak. And I decided to go into radio broadcasting school. And through there, my mentor, he actually worked at Nationals Park, the baseball stadium for the Washington Nationals. So it's Steven Strasburg's debut. I go, he's working there. I got a standing room ticket only. And the station that I used to always listen to at the time was ESPN 980 in DC that had legendary Coach John Thompson from from Georgetown Hoya. The father, Big John. He and Doc Walker, who was a former tight end for then Washington Redskins back in a couple of the Super Bowl years. Doc Walker played there. So they had a show on ESPN 980 that I used to call into all the time. And so they were broadcasting outside the stadium for Steven Strasburg's debut. And so my mentor who worked at the stadium, he goes out there and he talks to the producer. His name was Chuck Sapienza. He talks to him and he basically tells him about me, and he takes Chuck's email. So he comes back to me, and I email Chuck. I tell him I'm just trying to get into the business and all that. And Chuck recognized me because, like I said, I used to call in a lot, and I guess I was a fairly decent caller. And he brought me in, and I was on a unpaid internship a year working on shows like Coach John Thompson's show, and it was so cool to work with him and have a legend like that know me on a first name basis. That was beyond cool. And so long story short, I end up leaving that job a couple years later. I go back to school. I go to Morgan State out here in Baltimore. I moved to Baltimore. And at that time, I'm the videographer for Morgan State's football team. So I'm still around the game, still around sports. And we had a sports, I'm majoring in communications journalism. So we had a seminar, and one of the sports speakers was my former boss, Chuck Sapienza from ESPN 980. He's now at 105.7 The Fan.
Okay.
He's speaking. So I'm like, oh, I got to go to this. I haven't seen Chuck in a while, and I kind of need a job. It's crazy because I'm talking to Chuck, with just, first time seeing each other in a while. It was great. And he's like, yeah, man, if you need anything, let me know. And I'm like, I could use a job, you know? And so he brought me on, and I was a producer, just a board op. So I'm doing the overnights. The overnight shifts, and I'm doing some weekend producing. So I'm producing some of the weekend shows and stuff. And they were the flagship for the Orioles. So I would help produce some Orioles games at the time, and some University of Maryland football and basketball games as well. So then they end up moving me up to being the producer of a daytime show that's Monday through Friday with Jason Lockenfor and Ken Wyman. They're the two hosts of that show. I become the producer of that. And I'm doing it for a couple of months, but then I kind of just realized I want to do more. I've always wanted to be on air. I wanted to have my own show. That was my ultimate goal, to have my own show. So I end up kind of making a business decision, and I leave 105.7 The Fan to go to my alma mater, Morgan State, because they're starting up something new sports-wise. Morgan State owns a radio station, WEAA, and they want to get more sports stuff on that station. And so they had an opportunity for me to cover the Ravens for Morgan State. So I ended up leaving The Fan to go do that, and I covered the Ravens last season. And after that, that was just a one season situation, and we, renegotiate in the off season and figure it out. And during that time, the renegotiating time, Chuck hit me up again, like, I got a new opportunity. We have a little bit more funding, and we have an opportunity that can allow you to be in the field and do the things that you want to do. And I could throw you on air. We could give you a show. And I'm like, that's everything I'm looking for. I'm able to cover two major sports teams in the Orioles and the Ravens. And I'm also able to have my own show, which was my ultimate goal. And I am, able to get it. So that was definitely cool. That brought me back to the station, and I haven't regretted it for a second. It's been great ever since I've been back, being out in the field, covering the Orioles, having a surprisingly good season, and covering the Ravens, and being able to cover a guy like Lamar Jackson is just amazing. And then I have my own show. So I've kind of had to reevaluate my goals a little bit and make new ones. But it's a good problem to have.
That's evolution as a man, as a human being. We raise our goals and evolve. I mean, if you think, Muhammad Ali had a great quote once that if a 50-year-old thinks the way he did as a 25-year-old, he wasted 25 years of his life. So, hey, that's exactly what we do as humans. I mean, I want to get into this Ravens and stuff, but I got to back up because, I mean, you worked with and knew a legend of John Thompson. And I'm sure, did you grow up a Georgetown guy?
Definitely. Allen Iverson is my favorite basketball player of all time. And that's a large part of because of what I saw in Boyer.
Yeah. I mean, he's 3 inches taller, 2 inches taller. He might be the greatest ball player of all time.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it.
Pound for pound, the greatest ball player. I mean, pound for pound.
So I've never seen a guy do what AI did on the court at his size. And I mean, I can't say enough about what even just the impact he had on the NBA as a whole.
Culture,
I still to this day don't the culture of the game. Yeah, definitely. Like I still to this day don't think he gets his just due for everything that he brought to the game.
In the words of Roy Jones Jr., y'all must have forgot. That's what I mean. When it comes to Allen Iverson,
definitely.
Yes, yeah. No, I was a kind of Iverson fan growing up, just because what he could do. I mean, everybody talks about LeBron taking some bums to the finals and stuff that. Look at what Allen Iverson did.
That dude. I mean, that old Nike. I mean, Reebok commercial when they point out all of his injuries. I mean, that's all you need to see there.
Exactly. I mean, we could probably talk, but before we get into the Ravens and the Orioles stuff, I know, but so 2 questions. Give me a good John Thompson story, and then what does Georgetown have to do? Because I mean, we just kind of alluded to it in the 80s, especially in the 80s, in the early 90s, even a little bit in the early mid 2000s. That that university was top 10, top 15. I mean, the Big East
Yeah.
alone was must see TV, and now the Big East is, almost got the graveyard stick in it.
Right.
But
Honestly.
do you have a good John Thompson story, and then just kind of follow up what you think Georgetown needs to do going forward? Because the third is there now, correct? I mean, or no,
Yeah.
Pat
Well,
Ewing is.
no,
Pat Ewing
Pat's
is. Yeah,
there.
correct. You're
The
right.
third was there a few
Yeah.
years ago and
Now Pat
probably
Ewing.
lasted a little longer than he should have. But now
Yeah.
it's Pat, and uh, I kind of think the same thing is happening with Pat. I think he's been there a little longer than he probably should. And I love Pat. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, Pat has lost multiple top recruits in the same year with Mac McClung transferring when he transferred, and he also lost David Akinjo, who at one point was Big East Freshman of the Year. And these guys all end up transferring. Now, Akinjo's was a little of a unique situation. They had an on-campus situation with him, so I can more so understand his. But losing Mac McClung and having him transfer to Texas Tech, I think he went to after that, was just a backbreaker. I don't know if Pat reaches this team. They just went this year and had one of maybe the worst Big East record of Georgetown history this past season.
Did they had like 2 wins in the Big East or something like
yeah,
that?
If that they won, yeah. I think they went winless actually during the season, and then won a game in the Big East tournament.
That's right. Yeah, I think it was something like that. Right.
And Pat lucked up the year before because they ended up stinking it up in the regular season and getting hot in the Big East tournament and winning the tournament and punching their ticket to the NCAA tournament, which they had no business in because they were one and done. It showed out there. They got their butts beat to Colorado. So Georgetown is in a situation where I think it'll be a while before they get back to the good old days. They've got some guys on that team. I do like Muhammad, if he's still there. I can't really recall. He was good last year, a young guy, freshman. He was probably their best scorer, but Georgetown's got a long way to go for sure. As far as John Thompson, Big John, 2 things. One, one of his best things he ever told me was just talking about the great coaches. And he's like, emphasizing that great coaches are the ones that put together game plans to get the most out of their players that they have. They don't put together a game plan or a strategy or a scheme and force the players to go out there and do that. A great coach gets the most out of their players. And you can use that that will apply to any sport. You know what I'm saying? Not just basketball, but definitely football as well. So I've always taken that and I've used that in how I assess coaches and the product that I see on the field. As far as a great story, I did used to cover Georgetown for a little bit when I was working at ESPN 980. And John Thompson always famously sits right behind the basket, about row 2, I believe, row 1 or row 2, behind the basket. And he's out there at every game until he's gone. Rest in peace. But he used to go to the press conferences after the fact. So I'm a young guy at the time. I don't know anybody. And I go back there and of course, nobody in the media is paying me any attention because why should they? And John Thompson walks in and he's a towering figure, and he's like lumbering over, walking side to side. He's got massive hands, and he comes, he shakes my hand. He always used to call Cordell, that's how he used to call my name. Cordell, what's going on, Cordell? Good to see you. And he'll sit there and he talk. This is the first time, my first game covering Georgetown, and he's sitting back there before the press conference, and we're just talking about the game that just happened. And after the fact, while we're talking, I see all the media members kind of looking like, who is this that coach is back there talking to? And now he's not just saying hello to this guy. He's back there having a full-fledged conversation with him. And so he just he takes me up there. He's like, let me introduce you to the rest of the media. I mean, the attention he warrants when he walks up, man, I mean, all conversations stop. He doesn't even have to say anything. Everything stops and everybody looks at him, and he's just like, he introduces me, calls me his good friend. I'll never forget that. My good friend, Cordell. And from there, I ended up establishing a connection, with somebody that was in that media group at the time. So it just, I I've always appreciated him for that moment of, and just for always, being himself and coming and talking to me. And like I said, the fact that he called me his friend is something that I didn't take easy. But also just to the people out there, man, you never know who you'll meet at certain situations, who you can establish connections with. Networking is everything, man. And I just encourage people to make the most of every interaction that they have with people.
Exactly, man. I mean, that I've obviously never met John Thompson or anything like that, but I mean, I've always heard and always highly respected him from people who played for him, people who have met him. I mean, that's incredible. I got goosebumps. So you're telling your story because I mean, now it's like 6 degrees of separation. So, I mean, well, that's incredible, man.
Yeah.
So let's kind of shift gears here, man. I mean, the whole reason we brought you on here is to talk this the Ravens, a team that you, like you said, you covered and covering Lamar. So Lamar doing the Johnny Manziel sign right now? What is going on in this contract situation? I think that's probably that's like the biggest next contract that needs to get done as far as the NFL. So what's the read on Lamar here?
Yeah, I mean, Lamar spoke last week to the media, and that was probably the most forthcoming that Lamar has been about his contract, I think, and since we've been talking to him and this whole thing has been going on. Number one, he let it be known that there's going to be a cutoff time for negotiation, which we kind of already knew, but it's crazy that Lamar said it because, again, he doesn't tip his hand. He doesn't let you in at all. And I think that's number one why a lot of national media scrutinizes him the way that he does, because he doesn't give them anything. Nobody knows anything about Lamar besides what he gives you. And a lot of the stuff that's said is mostly going to be BS because he has an extremely small circle and he doesn't really let anybody in. But it was definitely eye-opening to hear him open up and say, yeah, there will be a cutoff time for negotiations, because realistically, we're talking about a starting quarterback for a team that's looking to contend for a Super Bowl. And the unique part about it is Lamar doesn't have an agent. So he's negotiating this deal on his own. So he's not going to want to carry this into the regular season when he's trying to, use his time to game plan and get right for that Sunday. He's not trying to have conversations about his contract throughout the year. So I'm not surprised to hear him say that there'll be a cutoff, but I'm more so surprised to actually hear him tell us. Now, there's reasons to be optimistic because what was unique about the press conference this week, out of all the rest of them, was that owner Steve Bisciotti is standing right behind us. There's some steps right behind where we do our press conferences, and Steve Bisciotti's out there. And he's standing on the steps and he's watching Lamar's entire press conference, and he's doing it with a smile. Also out there is GM Eric DeCosta, not too far away, kind of behind the media. So I'll admit it felt a little different than times in the past where we talked to Lamar about his contract situation. Seems a little bit more optimistic with a mix of Bisciotti being out there smiling and Lamar being a little bit more easy to talk to about his contract. It just feels a little different right now. Albeit all that said, I still am not necessarily sold that a deal will get done before the season. I think a deal will get done, but before the season, I feel like somebody's going to have to give, because I think right now we have two sides who are stern on getting what they want in this contract. Now, if we get to a point where the deal is done before the season, that right there the deal will tell it all. But it'll let us know that somebody pretty much had to cave and just say, you know what, I just want to get this done. I want to get it out the way. Let's just make it happen. But Lamar said, again, being a little bit more forthcoming than he has in the past, said that he wants to get a deal done before the season, which I'm kind of surprised to hear him say. So him saying that he wants to get the deal done is another reason for optimism. But will it happen? I won't believe it until I see it.
So I got to ask a question here for you. Like, is Lamar like in the local media, which you're part of? Is he as scrutinized as he is nationwide? Like, I feel like you mentioned it. Like, the nationwide audience, I feel like he's just scrutinized. It's he can't throw, or when they lose a game, it's because he can't pass the ball, or it's oh, you lose a game because he didn't run enough, or it seems like the blame always, which it always does fall a lot on the quarterback. I mean, it is the most scrutinized position in probably all the
No
sports.
question.
But I feel like Lamar gets very scrutinized as far as especially nation media. Is it happening there like at in the local media? Is he getting scrutinized in the local media as much as he is in the nationwide media, or is the local media behind Lamar here?
Well, I'm not going to necessarily say that local media is behind Lamar, but I'll say that they're more realistic when it comes to Lamar. It's not anywhere close to what you see nationally in the way that they talk about him. Nothing like that. I would say that all the people here in the local media all respect Lamar's game and all know what Lamar brings to the table. Let's not forget, people are so easy to forget what this Ravens offense looked like before Lamar got there. It was pedestrian at best. It's check down Charlie, because after the Super Bowl, the last Super Bowl, Joe Flacco didn't have a lot of weapons because they gave all the money to him. So there's not many weapons out there, but even still, Joe Flacco became a check down machine from a guy who, leading up to that Super Bowl, I would say maybe threw the best deep ball in the NFL, one of the most beautiful deep passes I've ever seen. So it's ironic that he became a check down Charlie, but it's like now with Lamar back there, and I mean, quite frankly, Lamar saved John Harbaugh's job. Lamar's rookie year, the Ravens had a losing record when Lamar got the keys to the car.
And I might be wrong. I can't remember. Didn't Harbaugh say he was going to resign, right? Or he was going to retire somewhere around, then they made the switch to Lamar. I can't remember. It was something, it was like he did save his job, but I thought he was going to retire or was going to like leave or resign at the end of the year. And then it was like, we got our quarterback. We're going to be a team now. So did that happen, correct? I can't remember, but I feel like
I don't necessarily recall it specifically, to be honest with you, but I somewhat do recall it being at least out there in the news that at the end of the season, Harbaugh would resign. I don't know if he said that. I can't say that he necessarily said that, but I do think I recall it being out there in the media that, this is the last year for Coach John Harbaugh. And Lamar goes out there and they pretty much win out. They end up winning the division before losing in the wild card to who did they play? They played the Chargers. The Chargers.
Okay.
Yeah, the Chargers the first year. They played the Chargers first year because that was the year that the Chargers flooded the box with defensive backs and had Derwin James playing like a linebacker.
Right. Yeah.
So all that said, I think the national media has, it is what it is when it comes to Lamar. It's unfair criticism. So, I mean, it's unprofessional, some of the stuff, and some of it's just flat out stupid. It's flat out stupid, and I think some people have their personal biases towards Lamar. And like I said earlier, I think the fact that, as in the media at least, nobody can get anything from Lamar. You only know what he tells you, because nobody's talking to anybody in his circle. The circle is extremely small, and Lamar is only giving you little to nothing. So you don't have much to go off of. But I can tell you, me personally, I definitely respect what Lamar brings to the field. I understand that this team will only go as far as Lamar Jackson takes them, and I understand that this offense is only a threat because they have Lamar Jackson back there.
Yeah, speaking of biases, I think it was just like a defensive coordinator from another team or defense assistant had come out, and it was, what he say? It was like, he'll never be QB1. He's a great athlete. They'll never win. I mean, that was pretty much that right there just shows you that for whatever reason it is that, he has something that people, since day one, even in Louisville, it felt like since he came out, that people just had him pegged as this guy that can't get it done. But he's proven, for the most part, he can get it done.
I forget earlier in our conversation, we said something to the effect of it is just people criticizing unfairly, just downright wow. And
Yeah.
Lamar is just a person that they continue to move the goalposts for, so to speak. It's like no matter what Lamar does, somebody's going to find a reason to say he's not that guy. I mean, the anonymous defensive coordinator says that if he wins 12 MVPs, he still won't be a quarterback one. Right there, that tells you all you need to know about how this
Exactly.
guy feels about Lamar Jackson. A lot of it is personal. It's just downright personal. Some of this stuff is racial. It has to be, and it's not just for Lamar. But you can see some of the stuff that these anonymous people are saying about guys like Patrick Mahomes, who has done nothing but terrorize every defense in the NFL. Like, I don't understand it. Kyler Murray, and now all of a sudden people are acting like Kyler Murray doesn't study, but yet this is a guy who's now on a second deal. He's a former #1 overall pick. This is a guy who's a Pro Bowl quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL when he's on. I'm not sitting here acting like Kyler Murray is perfect because he's not. But at the same time, I'm not going to disrespect these guys to act like they're not as good as they are. Lamar Jackson is a unanimous MVP, the youngest MVP in NFL history. I just don't, in the same breath to where these guys will criticize Lamar and say he can't throw and he can't lead a comeback with his arm, even though he did that multiple times this past season. He had a game this past season where he had over 500 yards of total offense to himself, and over 450 of those yards were passing. You know what I'm saying? But we talk about a guy like Justin Herbert, and people will act like this dude is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I think Justin Herbert is really good. I think he's one of the best young quarterbacks in the league. But can this dude make the playoffs first? Please? Before we start crowning him?
I'll tell you this. I think Justin Herbert has way more weapons than Lamar has. I mean,
easily.
And that kind of leads us to our next segue. So they just traded, they traded Hollywood Brown, his best receiver. And kind of leads us to our comment here. We have it. So, that they make the trade, they trade Hollywood Brown. So is Rashad Bateman? What's your read on him? Is Craig Coger wants to know, is he ready to be the #1 guy?
I think so. And we also have to understand that in this Ravens passing game, the #1 guy is Mark Andrews. Let's not get it twisted. Mark Andrews is the #1 guy. So when we're talking about the #1 receiver, we're really talking about a #2 here. You know what I'm saying? And I think Rashad Bateman is definitely good enough to be a #2. And I've said plenty of times on air as well, but even if Marquise Brown was still on this team, I think Rashad Bateman would be the best wide receiver on this roster. He's a better yak guy than Marquise Brown, which everybody thought that would be Marquise's strength. He was never a yak guy out in Baltimore, really. But Rashad Bateman was a yak guy when he came in last year. He missed the first 5 games, had to miss basically all of training camp. So he got off to a weird start last year. But once he got out there, you could see that this kid had something. And I can tell you now, man, this dude is the best route running receiver on this team. He's got excellent hands. I did my show earlier on 105.7 The Fan, and I had a caller call in and ask me about a comp between Rashad Bateman and Anquan Bolden. And I hadn't thought about it before, but it's actually a pretty good comparison, because I think when you look at Anquan Bolden, we talk about a guy who's a great route runner, a violent route runner, very precise in his movement. Every step is strong to the point to where his cuts are so sharp. His last cut will get him so much separation. And on top of that, he's one of the toughest receivers, has excellent hands. I think a lot of that is Rashad Bateman. He's a bigger guy than what people think. He's faster than what people think. And he's an extremely good route runner with very good hands. He catches everything that's thrown to him for the most part. What I'm excited with him is to see the deep ball. That's the one thing that we didn't get to see a lot from him last year, but we saw a lot from him at Minnesota when he played in college. He used to always be a deep ball guy. So I think that that's something that fans are going to see a lot more of this year. As a whole, the Ravens spreading the ball around more so vertically and also Rashad Bateman being a deep threat.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I think Rashad Bateman right now is a better wide receiver than Hollywood Brown was at this stage of his career, and I would take Rashad Bateman going forward. So why not make that trade and
Right.
not have to pay Hollywood? So I'm 100% behind you on that one. I know you got to eat, so I got a few more questions for you, and then we'll
Oh
get out
no,
of here.
man,
All
take
right.
your time.
All
Yeah,
right.
take your
All right.
time.
So what's the give me the percentage, because back to the Lamar question, I wanted to wrap that. We'll put a nice little bow on it here on this contract. What's the percentage that Lamar Jackson is in a Baltimore Raven starting next year, next season?
I would say 100%. Only
100%.
because even if they don't get a long-term deal done, they've still got the franchise tag, waiting for them. Lamar will be going into his 6th year. He's playing this year off the 5th-year option on his
Oh, that's
rookie
right. Yeah.
deal. So next year they have the option to use the franchise tag for the first time with him. And I would be surprised if it gets to that point. But if all things go wrong and they're not able to get a long-term deal done, then the franchise tag, they still have that in their back pocket.
So what's the percentage of chance the deal gets done before next season, before they franchise it? Nice little follow up here.
I would say I'm about 90% sure they'll get a deal done. And don't get it twisted. I have heard that they could possibly have something done any day now. I have heard that. But even still, I'm personally am not super optimistic that something will happen before this season. But definitely before next season, I think it's a no, because what we have here is a situation where both the player and the organization want each other. So that's usually somewhat of the hard part, is that one side wants to kind of get away from the other and they're only willing to negotiate but so far. But these two definitely want each other. It's a match made in heaven. It's just about getting the details down. And I think what it is Lamar wants to get the guaranteed money situated. Not necessarily, I don't think he's looking for a Deshaun Watson type of fully guaranteed deal, because I think that's such a one-off and a terrible contract in the grand scheme of things.
Every owner and GM hates
Yes.
that Deshaun Watson
And
contract.
Steve Bisciotti publicly said how much he hates that contract and how much he knows that contract has an impact on this Lamar deal. But at the same time, I don't think Lamar is looking for that type of deal. I do think he's looking to be the highest paid quarterback in the league annually. And I also think he's looking to get a large portion of his contract guaranteed as well. But ultimately, I do think they get the deal done at some point.
So what's the realistic, what's the expectations here for Baltimore? I mean, it's always, is it Super Bowl or bust, or what's your expectations here? This division, I mean, to set you up while you're thinking about this division is one of the, I mean, you could see all 4 teams making the playoffs, depending on obviously what happens with Deshaun Watson. The Bengals are coming off of a run like no other they've never had in 20 plus years. They got the dog. I love Joe Burrow. The Steelers, that defense is still going to be really good. I think Mitch Trubisky can, as long as he doesn't turn over the ball, he's got better weapons now at Pittsburgh than he ever had in Chicago. And then you got you guys, the Ravens, who, I mean, so many injuries last year. I mean, that's what I think people forget. J.K. Dobbins, torn ACL. The very next day, Gus the Bus, torn ACL. Lamar missed about half the season, it felt like at times. Hollywood Brown missed times. You just said it, Rashad Bateman never got, it took a while for him to get going. So it's like they were never like this. And, when healthy, we saw what that team could do. So, I mean, this AFC North division is really up for grabs, and you could literally make a case for all 4 teams. So what's realistic? What's the Ravens here, going into this season?
Well, yeah, I mean, you just hit on it, with what was the Ravens' issue last year was injuries. And I would argue that that's still the case for them right now. It's still health. J.K. Dobbins isn't back yet. Gus Edwards isn't back yet. Now, I think J.K. Dobbins, while I don't necessarily believe he'll play week 1, I think he will be back in the earlier part of the season. Gus Edwards, however, I'm not as high on him returning as quickly. I think he'll be more so in the second half of the season, if at all, to be honest with you. I think he's a little ways away. As well, Ronnie Stanley, all-pro left tackle. The Ravens were terrible on the offensive line last year. That's what everybody talked about, how the blitz got to them last year. Well, the cat was out the bag after that Miami game because everybody realized that their offensive line stunk. And all you had to do was send some heat. And it got to a point to where Lamar clearly did not trust the guys in front of him. And once your quarterback doesn't trust the offensive line, nothing good is going to happen. As well, Marcus Peters, another all-pro player, cornerback, was also out last year. He got hurt the same day that Gus Edwards got hurt. I think they got hurt 2 plays separate from each other on the same day of practice. So many injuries for the Ravens last year. And even this year, all those guys that I just talked about are not back yet. I think Marcus Peters, we could possibly see him return at some point during training camp. Ronnie Stanley, I think he's in the same boat. Ronnie possibly could be there for week 1, but I think after the way last year went for him, the Ravens are going to take their sweet time with Ronnie Stanley. They're not going to rush him out there until they know that he is fully ready to go. So to answer your question, I think that this is a team, when healthy, if healthy, is able to win this division and possibly win a playoff game or 2. I think that the Ravens are a good enough team to win in the regular season. It's about the playoff. And for me, it's about what's going to happen in the playoffs if you're not able to, get 5 to 6 yards of carry anymore. What's going to happen when you are forced to do something you don't necessarily want to do? And I'm not saying that I don't think that they want to throw the ball, but I don't think that they want to get to the point to where where they're solely dependent on throwing the ball. The Ravens need the run game. It's their identity. It just is what it is. And Lamar's a big part of that. So I think that this is a team that can get to the playoffs, but do I see them necessarily beating a team like the Bills, beating a team like the Chiefs, who I still respect, or beating any of those AFC West teams that are juggernauts right now, or the Dolphins, who are just completely loaded right now? I don't know. I think they could beat a few of those teams, but teams like Buffalo, I don't think that they're better than Buffalo right now. And we'll see. Buffalo comes to town, I believe, week 4. So we'll get to see those 2 teams get it on here out in Baltimore. But I just don't see this team as a Super Bowl team right now.
So we got a couple comments in here. Mutual friend of ours, NFL Outdated. He wants to know, did the Ravens change up their health staff at all? And, with so many injuries, they obviously need to improve keeping players on the field and training and whatnot. So, I mean, is that a training? Because you just alluded to it, like it was like 4 players, like back-to-back days. ACL, was that the field? Is that training? The training staff? What's that? It seems like every year that there is that team that just gets riddled with injuries. And unfortunately, last year it was your Ravens.
Yeah, they still have the same head of training staff. He's still there, Coach Saunders. John Harbaugh did say after last season, like, his emphasis was on looking at everything that they do, and that's all the way to the Ravens and how they handle injuries and strength and conditioning and everything like that. So I think that that's something that they definitely looked at, because it cost them their season. It definitely cost them their season last year, and I don't think they want to go down that road again. Now, as far as keeping guys on and off the field, I think, like I said, guys like Ronnie Stanley and even J.K. Dobbins right now, who has been begging to get back on the field, I don't think that we're going to see any of these guys until they've been given the go-ahead by the doctors that everything's a full go and that they can go out there, and that they're not only healthy enough to play football, but healthy enough to be themselves. A lot of people forget that, coming back from injuries is as much mentally important as it is physical. You can physically run, but if you don't mentally believe that you can plant on that leg that you just had the ACL on and make those type of cuts and the movements that you're used to making. I mean, Ronnie Stanley is an athletic guy. He depends on a lot of movement, and he's got an ankle problem. So he's got to be able to depend and trust that he can bend his legs and put all that weight and strength on his ankles and move the way he used to move back when he was an All-Pro. Because if not, he could borderline be hurting the team.
So we'll get two more quick questions for you, Cordell. So let's just say it doesn't go well for the Ravens, right? Like, I mean, let's just say Cincinnati is what they are last year, continue to be improvement. The Browns somehow, I mean, I don't know if there's more than one team in this NFC North that can make it, because you alluded to the AFC West being just stacked 1 through 4, and
Right.
2 or 3 teams can make the playoffs out of that division. If the Ravens miss the playoffs, and let's just say they are, 8-7 or 7-8 or whatever it is, somewhere around that middle of 500, or like one game at 500, above 500, how hot is it in the kitchen for Harbaugh and Lamar?
Oh man, that would be the worst case scenario, especially if Lamar doesn't have a deal yet and we get to the end of the season. Because if the Ravens end up not having a good year, then that means either Lamar Jackson was hurt or Lamar had a bad year. So that wouldn't bode well for him in contract negotiations. At that point, the Ravens are definitely franchise tagging him, and dare I say it, possibly drafting his replacement in that upcoming draft. You know what I'm saying? And as far as Coach Harbaugh, I mean, that would be bad. That would be bad. I don't think it would necessarily mean that he would be fired. If anything, Greg Roman would be fired, no doubt about it. Greg Roman would be out as the offensive coordinator. I think this is a make it or break year for him personally. But Coach Harbaugh, I really wouldn't be able to see him being fired, even if the Ravens haven't. If the Ravens are that bad, something went on. It's injuries again or something. It's not them. I don't believe it'll be them going out there with a complete roster and flat out losing all these games. I think it'll have to be something drastic, like a big time player like Lamar Jackson or somebody like that was out. And hopefully that's not the case. Yeah, I just have a hard time envisioning them being that bad.
All right, my last question here: greatest sporting event that you witnessed, from a childhood to now, whether it was on TV or live in person. Favorite sporting event where you're like, man, that's the event that I just will always remember the rest of my life.
Yeah, I gotta ponder on that one for a while. So I covered the Capitals. I covered a Alexander Ovechkin hat trick. I was there for that, which was actually the only game I just happened to cover them for that day in place of somebody. It was the only game I covered, Capitals game I covered for them that year, and he got a hat trick. So obviously Ovi's got plenty of hat tricks in his career, but I was blessed enough to be able to be there to cover one of them. As a fan, sadly, probably my most memorable games that I've been there to witness are not fun ones. they're not fun ones. Like I said, I grew up a Washington Redskins fan, so I've had to watch a lot of bad football watching those guys. So I was there the playoff year with RG3 against the Seahawks.
Yeah.
When towards ACL, that he was already banged up coming into the game, and it finally gave out. And I'll never forget, I had a Sean Taylor 21 towel, RP the GOAT, Sean Taylor.
Yes.
I had a 21 towel that I took with me everywhere. Like I said, I used to play a lot of flag football and everything, so I always wore that towel in every game and stuff. So I was so mad after Robert Griffin blew out his ACL that I just threw the towel. I just launched the towel up in midair, and it just gone. It was just gone. I was so mad at myself, like, as it left my hand, but it was just out my hand, and it was so reactionary. I can't believe it. Also, I was there. I used to have season tickets. Jim Zorn, back when Jim Zorn was the head coach of the team. Monday night game against the Giants, and I'll never forget it. It's right before halftime. They're setting up. Washington is setting up for a field goal, to get a field goal just to get on the board before halftime to get something. And the Giants, and then all of a sudden Washington comes out in this weird formation, clearly
Yeah,
a
I remember
fake.
that. Yeah.
And the Giants called timeout because they see it's a fake, and they call timeout to reset. So Washington comes out and they go right back into the fake formation, run the fake field goal. It turns out to get picked off or fumbled. Something drastic happens,
Yeah, I
and it's
remember that.
taken all the way back for a touchdown. And I shouted out so many words that I cannot repeat on air right now about Jim Zorn. I just knew he was going to be fired before he came back out after halftime. I just knew they were going to fire him. So, I mean, sad to say, most of the games that I've been uh, have been heartbreaking. But I've covered the Orioles this year. They've had some memorable games. No doubt. I was there for Austin Hayes this year. He hit for the cycle in the rain. So I was there for that. So that was cool for sure. That's probably the coolest moment of the year, covering the Orioles. And Trey Mancini just had an inside the park 2-run home run the
Yeah,
other
I saw
day
that. Yeah.
on Mo Gabba Day, which Mo Gabba's a kid who passed away unfortunately a couple years ago. Had a lot of health complications, but he's a super fan of the Ravens and the Orioles. And what was cool about it is Trey Mancini probably had the closest relationship with Mo out of all the athletes in the area. And so Trey Mancini, of course, is in a lot of trade rumors right now with the Orioles. So that at bat was potentially Trey Mancini's last at bat at Camden Yards. And if that's the way Trey goes out, that is a storybook ending.
And they should keep Trey. I mean, they're only about 3 games out of the second wild card, man.
Yeah. I mean, I
They make
wouldn't be upset with them keeping Trey. Only thing with that is Trey has no team control after this year. And I would imagine that the team would let Trey walk. But we'll see. But yeah, I mean, the Orioles, they lost today. They lost 2 out of 3 out in Cincinnati. That doesn't help them. Cincinnati stinks. They shouldn't be out there losing to them. But the Orioles are still, as at least as of earlier, they were still 3 games out of the last wild card spot. I don't know how much the Orioles can really do, even if they get into the playoffs, but it's light years ahead of what everybody thought the Orioles would look like
100%.
coming into this season.
They thought they was gonna be like the Cubs. I mean, I'm a Cub
Yeah.
fan, so
Oh
I know
man.
about. Yeah. Hey, oh man. Hey, don't get me started because I can't say words. I'm trying to keep it PG here these days.
Right. I feel you.
Hey, Cordell, go ahead and get them plugs in here, man, and we'll get you out of here.
Yeah, man. Definitely follow me on Twitter or Instagram. It's at Cordell Woodland. On both of those, definitely you could check me out. My show is from 4 to 7 on 105.7 The Fan here in Baltimore, but it'll actually also be on the Odyssey app. So the Odyssey app allows you to listen no matter where you are. So, you can be out and wherever the viewers are right now, listening from the same spot you're watching us at, and you could be listening to me from 4 to 7 every Sunday. So definitely tune in there. And honestly, no telling where you'll hear me at, considering I cover the Orioles and the Ravens. I'm kind of popping up talking about both teams all over the place right now.
Well, Cordell, man, I appreciate it. The living legend, Mr. Cordell Woodland. The only person a bigger legend than out of Baltimore, D.C. area is Omar. I don't know if the kids catch that Omar reference, but hey,
Oh
I
yeah,
appreciate it.
they know that whistle. They know that Omar whistle. You better get to
Right.
running.
Hey, this has been another great episode of the Bodkin Show. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, be a friend, tell a friend, share with a friend. Thank you, folks. This has been another great episode of the Bodkin Show. We'll see you. I'll be on the Bodkins and Buffoon Show tomorrow right here on this network. So check us out right here tomorrow. Bodkins and Buffoon coming at 7:30 Central Time Zone. I'll be back then. See you guys.